Hello, welcome to Comic Tropes. I'm your host, Chris. You know, a lot of things can be recalled. You could have a food or a drug recall, or you could recall what just happened earlier in this episode. You know, a lot of things can be recalled. You could have a food or a drug recall. I remember that. Hey, speaking of recalling things, let's talk about recalled comic books. Hello, welcome to Comic Tropes. I'm your host, Chris. You know, a lot of people touch a comic book before it gets to us, the readers. There's probably something like 150 new comics that are coming out every single month, and most of them will have different writers, illustrators, inkers, letterers, colorists, editors. It's going to go from a publisher to a printer to a distributor before it gets on the newsstand. My point is, when so many people are touching things, it's easy for mistakes to get through from time to time. And sometimes that's going to be a small mistake that nobody catches, not even us, the reader. And sometimes it's going to be a mistake that we catch way later. But sometimes the mistakes are so big that the publisher is either going to not ever reprint it, they're going to recall it, sometimes they're even going to destroy all those copies. So today I've got 15 different examples of times when publishers recalled or stopped printing their comic books. Why 15? Why the hell not? Who needs top 10 lists? 15, that's what I give you. That's the new Comic Tropes guarantee. Let's get started. First book I want to talk about is Batman Damned, #1 from 2018. The reason this comic has notoriety is because the readers can see Batman's genitals for the first and probably, realistically, only time. DC actually sold 115,000 copies of this book, and that was through their Black Label imprint, which makes comics that are aimed at mature readers. Batman walks around in the Batcave without his pants on, and he's in shadow, but artist Lee Bermejo still showed the outline of Bruce Wayne's bat junk. DC did not recall this comic, but they did edit the art to be in full silhouette in all digital and then future physical reprints. Now, this is a book that's in plenty of demand. For some reason, a lot of readers are really fascinated with seeing the outline of Batman's penis. I really couldn't get into the psychological ramifications of why that is so. However, what I can tell you is that yes, it's in demand. At the same time, over 100,000 copies did get out onto newsstands, so it's not the rarest book you'll find in the world. I wouldn't recommend paying more than $25 for it. Moving forward. Marvel has a similar story. Issue #3 of Elektra Volume 2 from 2001 had 2 pages where Elektra was drawn in the nude.
It's a lady.
However, strategic shadows and word balloons cover up anything scandalous. Nevertheless, Marvel recalled the issue and put out a revised version with a few lines indicating that Elektra now wears underwear. If you were looking to start a collection of recalled comics, this would actually be a decent starting point because rough estimates are about 5,000 copies exist in the wild. That's a good amount. It's not in tremendous demand. It means that you should only pay cover price or maybe even less. So if you want a collection of either recalled comics or comic books where you, the reader, know that the character is naked, but you can't actually see that they're naked, yeah, this would be a good book to start with. Next up, the hardcover first print of Crisis on Infinite Earths from 1998. Now, this is a gorgeous edition. It has this beautiful slipcase painted by Alex Ross. I love it. However, it has a mistake. In fact, it came with this notice that there is a misprint in this book. If you go to page 281, it reprints the bottom panel from 280. So, DC actually allowed customers, if they wanted, they could return this to the store, DC would buy it back, destroy it, and there was a reprinting without the mistake. I didn't really care. it's just one panel. I was just happy to have it in hand, and I didn't want to wait. It was going to be at least a month, if not 3 months, to get the corrected version. So I kept it. It means that there are copies like that out there. For a while, it was in demand. These days, there have been so many reprintings of Crisis on Infinite Earths, or you could read it digitally on, say, the DC Comics app, that it's not as in much demand. You can buy it for cover price. Just a weird little printing error. Some of the stuff that's been recalled seems really tame. For instance, Action Comics number 869 got recalled by DC Comics because of the cover. There's Clark Kent. He's hanging out with his dad on the family farm. You're probably asking yourself, well, what's so bad about that? Well, put on your deerstalker cap, grab your magnifying glass. If you look closely, apparently Superman, as an adult, is enjoying a beer. Well, to be fair, it says beer, but for all we know, maybe it's root beer or ginger beer. Still, DC asked stores to destroy all copies, and the next week, they shipped a new version that has a hilariously large soda pop printed on the bottle. There are only about 1,000 copies estimated to be out there, so it might make for a fun hunt, but it also isn't really in demand, so you shouldn't have to pay too much. Another DC book that was recalled over something that seems fairly trivial now is their Elseworlds 80-page giant from 1999. Now, this was an anthology featuring a story by Liz Glass and Kyle Baker called Letitia Lerner, Superman's Babysitter. Letitia freaks out as baby Superman gets into all sorts of dangerous situations because she doesn't know that he cannot be hurt. In one scene, baby Superman gets zapped in a microwave. So, apparently editor and president of DC, Paul Levitz, got a bit too scared over it because DC had all of their copies recalled.
I have to go now. My planet needs me.
And current estimates are that only about 700 copies exist in the wild. However, that story did go on to win an Eisner Award for Best Short Story. DC also later reprinted the story in both Bizarro Comics and a full reprint of the original Elseworlds 80-page giant in 2011. I think it's a bit more understandable why DC had this next book recalled, because it wasn't necessarily aimed at adult readers only. In Batman and Robin the Boy Wonder, issue number 10, the last issue of that series, although it was meant to continue, it was written by Frank Miller and art by Jim Lee. In that issue, they accidentally printed a bunch of swear words. To be clear, the curse words are meant to have been blacked out as though they're being censored, but DC sent it to print with the text and the black box covering it delineated as separate colors, so the swears still show up as a dark gray. Maybe 20 years earlier, printing would not have been this precise, but what it means is that the swears were definitely readable. Swearing in a Batman book was big enough to make the rounds on the news. The LA Times asked writer Frank Miller about it, and he said, quote, "I have no idea how this awful thing happened. It's just one of those terrible and glorious things that happen time to time in publishing." He then said he wanted at least 3 copies. He knew fans wanted it even more, but DC recalled it and fixed it. So what's worse than a swear in a superhero comic? An ethnic slur. Yeah, this one's not as much fun. That's what happened in Wolverine issue 131 thanks to a series of accidents. In the issue's original printing, Wolverine inexplicably describes his enemy Sabretooth as an offensive name for a Jewish person. Writer Todd DeZago actually explained what happened here. He was hired to write 3 issues of Wolverine. This would have been the 3rd. But in the 2nd issue, he got a lot of editorial interference. He decided to step down after he plotted issue 131. Marvel hired Brian K. Vaughan to script the issue with limited time left before it needed to be printed and given to stores. So, in it, Brian K. Vaughan called Sabretooth an assassin. The editor decided to cross that word out, and in the margins of the page that they were sending to the letterer, he wrote killer. But it was faxed or something like that, and the word was cut off. The letterer didn't understand what the word was and made an assumption. Didn't know that it was offensive. And because the book was so far behind, it just went out without being proofread. It ended up getting onto store shelves. Marvel did recall it, but a bunch had gone out early because back then, Marvel actually had this program where they would send issues as a first look to comic book stores. And so anyway, a lot got out there. It also led to a lot of bad press. Much more innocent was when Marvel almost spoiled Star Wars Return of the Jedi back in 1983.
The next chapter in the continuing Star Wars saga.
And who saved the day? Well, of course, it had to be Luke Skywalker himself.
I'm Luke Skywalker. I'm here to rescue you.
So, Marvel did an adaptation of the film in Marvel Comics Super Special Issue 27. But they released that to stores a full month before the film hit theaters. Mark Hamill happens to be a real-life comics reader, and he saw it in a comic book store on the shelf in May of 1983, according to the Comics Buyer's Guide issue 497 from that month and year. Mark Hamill passed on the news to Carol Kalish, Marvel's direct sales manager, and she was able to get stores to pull the issue until the film came out. It was a more innocent time. Stores didn't have something like eBay where they could sell a rare variant or anything like that, or try to get social media clout by being the first person to spoil things. So the stores actually just did it. They just held on to that issue for a month until the movie came out. Now it couldn't really be spoiled, and they put it on sale. Close call. Thanks, Mark Hamill. Another movie comic book that's much harder to find is the Matrix movie preview. In 1999, Warner Brothers created a giveaway comic intended for people who bought movie tickets to see The Matrix. The movie had designs and storyboards by comic book artists like Steve Scroce and Jeff Darrow, and the writer-directors, the Wachowskis, had also made comics. So this comic is said to have stories by Paul Chadwick, art by Bill Sienkiewicz. At the last minute, Warner Brothers was concerned that the comic book was too mature, and they pulped all the copies. Now this was, keep in mind, for a movie that was rated R. Meant you couldn't go see it unless you were at least 17. Anyway, Warner Brothers panicked. They pulped the issue. The CGC has a census of about 280 copies that have made it out that they've graded. So there are a few copies out there. Surprisingly, I looked on eBay. You could probably find a copy for about $20. Pretty cool. Here's a somewhat silly one as a palate cleanser. In 2012, DC pulped all of their copies of Swamp Thing number 11. Writer Scott Snyder explained what happened on his Twitter account. Snyder was flying to Heroes Con when his editor on the book, Matt Idelson, called him, explaining they had to destroy the issue because of some tentacles in the book that appear to look a little too much like penises. Snyder explained that he had actually asked the artist to add more tentacles to a scene, and then the editor points out that Snyder needs to take a closer look at panel 4 on this page. Yeah, it was way too suggestive. DC destroyed the books before they were shipped out to stores and issued a corrected version. Sometimes, however, issues can be rare but not valuable because no one cares. That's the case with NFL SuperPro issue 6. In that issue, SuperPro battles some criminals dressed up as Kachinas, which are spirit beings in Pueblo culture. The Hopi tribe was offended and actually initiated a lawsuit. Marvel agreed to do a recall. However, the issue had already made it to stands, gotten the news, so the only issues to even have been recalled were regular unsold copies at the stores. Don't pay more than $5 for this one. Another lawsuit was initiated over the comic book Hallie the Hooters Girl. That was a 1998 book by a publisher called Cabbage Comics. I cannot find any other books by them. They didn't get permission from Hooters to use their trademark. They got sued. They never published anything else. CGC has 108 graded copies in their census, but there are probably thousands of raw copies out there. Alan Moore's comic League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is a period piece. It uses early 19th century literary heroes as a team of heroes battling a villain. Issue 5 got recalled for a very weird reason. Issue 5 included a vintage ad from that time period, and it was not a fictional ad. It was a real ad that they just reprinted. It was for a woman's douche, and the only reason it was controversial was that the brand name was Marvel. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was published by DC. Once again, publisher Paul Levitz had the issues destroyed over concerns that Marvel Comics could sue them. It got reprinted with the brand changed to the word Amaze. Somehow the first print, which was supposed to be completely pulped, did get some copies out. CGC's census says that they count 134 graded copies. I couldn't find any completed sales for this one recently. I see on eBay some people asking for as much as $2,000 for a copy, but I don't see records of them selling for that much. And that reminds me, this is completely separate, of a book that I have seen listed on eBay for years. A guy has listed again and again this comic asking for over $1 million because it supposedly has a rare mistake. The seller claims the book is a copy of Marvel 2-in-1 from April of 1981, but that the printer accidentally created with DC's Teen Titans on the cover. And as I said, they're asking for over $1 million. It is never sold. They just keep relisting it. I've always gotten a kick out of that one. First of all, in my opinion, it would not be that hard to remove a cover and restaple it with a different cover. So it's very hard to prove the provenance of that happening from a printer and getting to a store. Very hard to prove that that's real. Second, even if it's real, nobody cares. Yeah, it might be a real mistake. Nobody cares. Certainly not enough to pay $1.2 million for it. Here's a book that could have led to a lawsuit. In Universe X Spidey, longtime Marvel inker Al Milgrom hid something in the background of a panel. The spines on a bookshelf in the background of page 28, panel 3 read, quote, "Bob Harris, ha ha, he's gone. Good riddance to bad rubbish. He was a nasty SOB." Bob Harris wasn't always the most popular editor-in-chief at Marvel, but if that had reached print, Harris might have had grounds for a libel case. Marvel found out when they sent stores those preview editions I mentioned earlier, and they ended up recalling and pulping the entire run. Al Milgrom did get fired, although they later rehired him. Marvel reprinted the comic with blank cover spines. Interestingly, this book was based on artist Alex Ross's Earth X books, and the first comics work of Ross's career included doing Terminator covers for Now Comics. If you look at the cover for Terminator Burning Earth #5 and read the text from the Terminator's vision backwards, it reads, "Now Comics blows," because Ross was allegedly not happy with his pay. That one got printed and released, and people didn't find out until years later. Finally, let's talk about a recalled comic that's pretty valuable. In the mid-'80s, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was a massively popular, new, independently published comic. In 1987, Mirage Studios reprinted issue 4. The first print had been back in 1985, and the studio commissioned a new cover for the second print, and had a huge 60,000 copy print run. However, the printer made a mistake and used the cover for their spin-off title, Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1. The studio decided to pulp the run, but somehow about 1,000 copies survived. There's not necessarily any reason to think it's wrong. It's just using artwork that was intended for a different title. Prices have gone up and down on this over the years, but as recently as this month, I saw a raw copy went for $1,000. So there you have it. A bunch of mistakes either with printing or bad judgment or just second-guessing themselves. A wide variety of reasons why comic books have been recalled or never printed again. It does make some of them somewhat rare. It does not necessarily make them valuable. But, in my opinion, part of the fun of comic books is not just reading the stories. It's the collecting aspect. And this can make for a unique hunt, a unique collection to go for. Comic books that have been recalled for various reasons. And it makes me wonder, you, the viewer, what do you have for a unique collection? Do you have anything that you do, like, all the appearances of Donatello from Ninja Turtles, or all the final issues from a comic book, or something like that? Do you have anything that's unique as a collection? I'd love to know. Let me know in the comments down below. Please hit like and subscribe. That really helps the channel. And with that being said, I'll see you next week for a deep dive into a very influential artist. Thanks, everybody. You know what I'm going to say. Keep reading comics. Well, folks, you just heard me prattle on about recalled comics, but there's somebody here that you should hear from.
Hello.
Look who we've got. It's Comic Drake.
I'm on the show.
You're on my show because we're in person, and I just thought it was interesting timing because what was the video you just dropped?
I just made a video about the Dollar Tree comic book that got recalled because I was just randomly in a Dollar Tree one day, picked it up, and then I needed to get a copy to scan for my video, and then I just found out randomly that it was recalled, and I went down this big rabbit hole.
Isn't that crazy, folks? I mean, what weird timing. But so, I gave you a quick story about, historically a bunch of them, but Drake literally puts on his Sherlock Holmes hat and magnifying glass and made some cold calls to places. And I don't want to give it all away, but I'm just going to say, it's a really interesting video about a book that's currently being recalled and trying to figure out why. Why?
I appreciate the shout out, man.
Absolutely.
We're going to go meet some fans, which is going to be awesome. So if you're watching this now and you were there, hi, thank you for coming out.
Thank you for watching, everybody. Keep reading comics. What do you say?
Because comics.
There you go. I'd also love to plug something, my second channel. Comic Tropes After Dark is a channel that has 3 shows. I've got a weekly live stream on Monday where I recap the biggest comic book news of the week, joke about it or riff about it with the audience, and we do reviews of the current comics, sometimes even interviews. I've got Trash Movie Bonanza over there where Jim Mafood and I, and sometimes another comic book artist or writer, will join us and we'll look at schlock and cult movies. And sometimes I do something called an indie showcase where I either look at indie books that have been mailed to the Comic Tropes After Dark P.O. Box, or I even sometimes do live streams where I just let people talk about their crowdfunded or small press or indie books.